From the beginning, you know the end. From the reveal of Halo Reach all the way through to completing the campaign, that statement rang true. We knew how this story would end. Halo Reach is a prequel to Halo Combat Evolved, the first game in the Halo series, and it was Bungie's swan song. It was their final Halo game before they moved on to Destiny. It tells the story of Noble Team, the Spartans responsible for delivering the AI Cortana to the Pillar of Autumn, where Master Chief waits in cryosleep. And as a prequel set in a totally new location with totally new characters, Reach was afforded a chance to do things very differently. At its core, it's still a Halo game, but a lot of changes were made to the gameplay, the tone, the soundtrack, even the camera angles used in the cutscenes. Reach is a lot darker, even with the absence of the Flood. It highlights the terrors of war more than any other Halo game. Characters are killed in quick succession, some in the blink of an eye. You see more casualties, more destruction, and it feels more grounded in reality as a result. The soundtrack reflects this too. You don't get too many peaceful tracks in Reach, but you do get powerful thumping percussion and blaring brass over the chaos on the battlefield. And the camera places you right in the thick of it. It's almost like a handheld camera is following Noble Six's movements in the cutscenes, giving them a more boots-on-the-ground kind of feel. And this makes every battle, every moment feel more visceral, more unavoidable. You see things as Noble Six sees them. Halo Reach was criticized by some for its length, and while it isn't a very long campaign, I think quality over quantity suits Halo pretty well. The best missions in Halo are infinitely replayable, and ironically the missions in Halo Infinite are actually less so. I mean, not only did the game launch without mission select, but the missions themselves are a bit more on the basic side with a lot of generic Forerunner hallways. The freedom of the open world is that game's strength, not the linear missions. And in Reach, the whole campaign is linear, but at times that linearity is more of a mirage. In the mission-only sword base, you have to complete a set amount of objectives in a relatively small area, or you won't be able to beat it, but the freedom it gives you in completing those objectives is what makes it such a great mission. You start in a simple firefight outside the base, and soon after you'll collect the target locator, a new weapon, which you can use to destroy some wraiths, but if you know how, you can actually steal one of the wraiths instead and use that to move to the next objective. If you don't, you get a Warthog, which is actually the intended vehicle for you to use, and then from there you can either go left or right, but both paths wrap around to the same point in the end, so you're free to just go wherever you want. You're introduced to some new weapons, a new vehicle in the Revenant, kind of a speedier wraith with less power, and then you get a Gorsehog too, and you use that to return to the base, fight 2 hunters, go up the elevator, fight through each floor of Sword Base, and it all culminates in a set piece with rockets and phantoms before an awesome cutscene. And that was just one mission. Reach really makes the most of its brevity by offering up some of Halo's best missions, period. Every single one is memorable, and none of them feel like leftovers or bridges between better missions, and they're all distinct. You have a stealth mission, a space battle followed by a fight in low gravity, a falcon ride through New Alexandria, backlit by Covenant ships glassing the planet's surface. Reach's campaign does not waste your time, nor does it lose sight of the tragedy of the planet's story. Sure, you have some light-hearted moments, showing that Noble Team aren't just generic suits of armor,
May I?
Don't cut yourself.
But the hopelessness surrounding you only grows more overwhelming with every objective. The sense of desperation accelerates with every mission. From first making contact with the Covenant, things quickly turn into all-out war. Then when you think you're about to make a difference as George sacrifices himself in the belly of a Covenant vessel, an entire fleet quickly replaces it, hammering home the futility of your efforts. One by one you lose more Spartans, you watch entire cities crumble, entire continents burn to glass. You fight on despite the loss, despite knowing you will lose, and you make the ultimate sacrifice. The last mission of the game sees the player making their final stand against increasingly impossible odds. Your helmet begins to crack, and you finally fall among the ruins of a planet that just 9 or 10 missions ago had never even seen the Covenant in the flesh. Reach is lost, but Master Chief and Cortana survive. The Pillar of Autumn survives. The events of Halo CE have to take place, and we know Earth is humanity's last stronghold. So what chance did Reach even have? Reach has a brilliant campaign, but it wasn't just a campaign. Reach also had an expansive multiplayer, with a lot of new and old modes for players to enjoy. And personally, I don't have as much to say about the multiplayer as I do the campaign. I mean, I liked Reach multiplayer a lot. I thought the maps were good, the modes were awesome, especially Invasion, or Big Team Battle, or Infection. You know, all the classics were here. It was great. The sandbox was a blast, with new weapons like the grenade launcher becoming fast favourites of mine. And while it may not be Halo's peak competitively, it was just a great game to play with friends and a fun time all around. But not all Halo fans were immediately sold, particularly on some of the new features Bungie added for the first time. To this day, Halo fans are still arguing over whether Sprint should exist in Halo. And to those on the outside looking in, it's probably the most ridiculous argument of all time. I mean, literally one team is advocating for the ability to just run, and the other wants it gone completely. It seems like such a silly, weird thing to argue about, but in the context of the Halo series, the conversation does make a lot of sense. And while Infinite may have found a way to make Sprint tolerable for most, back in 2010 this was still a hot topic, and so was the addition of armor abilities. These were a new take on equipment from Halo 3. Rather than being a one-time use ability that you picked up on the map, they would let you continuously use an ability as long as it wasn't on cooldown. Sprint was an armor ability, and so was Jetpack, Active Camouflage, Hologram, and Armor Lock, and that last one proved to be especially controversial, mainly due to how it slowed down the pace of fights. Other things like the DMR, Bloom, and the addition of loadouts would be criticized as well. And you're free to hold your own opinions about all these things. Some of them would go on to define Halo Reach in the eyes of many. To some, it's simply the Halo game that introduced Sprint, and they can't shake that. Now, I won't get into the arguments for why these features should or shouldn't be a part of Halo. I personally don't mind anything Reach added, but you know, I didn't grow up with the sprintless arena gameplay of Halo 1 to 3. I only got into those games later on, and it isn't as much of a problem for me. However, I can see why these new features became definitive parts of Reach, aspects that simply can't be overlooked when looking at the game through a critical lens. But more than any of that, when I think of Reach, I think of one thing. One map. One world. Forge World.
The first time I looked at Forge World and I was like, oh hey, cool, that's... Oh, holy, you guys did what?
There's just way too much. You can't keep it all in your head at once. It was so beyond our production capability. We were just like, you know, that's crazy. We can't do that. I couldn't stop the artist who started creating it.
Back in 2010, Forge World blew people away with its scope. Halo fans had never been given a map this impressive before. It was bigger than Sandbox, split into sections that acted as their own remakes of previous maps. You had the canyon, inspired by Blood Gulch, the pillar, which was based on Halo 2's Ascension, then you had the island, the Colosseum, and all the rest, and when combined it became one seamless open space, where players could craft whatever their imagination could conjure. Well, as long as it fit within the budget, the Xbox 360 was rather limited when it came to how much you could place on the map, so it wasn't quite as free as it is now that the game's on PC and newer consoles. But still, it was enough back in 2010 for players to build just about anything, even if some of it was more on the rudimentary side. But Forge World wouldn't have been Forge World without the new tools Reach gave us. Phased objects completely changed the game, removing the frustration from Halo 3's Forge by letting players literally phase objects through each other, completely removing the clunkiness. Rotation Snap allowed for more symmetry, pre-made buildings ensured that anyone, no matter how skilled, could make a decent looking base, and those who were skilled? Well, let's just say people got pretty wild. From remaking entire ships to finding ways to just totally break the game, Reach just didn't let up. For what was still a relatively limited mode compared to things that were possible in other games, it was really amazing to see what people could come up with. All you have to do is look at the custom games people were making to see what I'm talking about. One example is Cat and Mouse, which saw players in wraiths chasing players in ghosts, trying to eliminate them all one by one. But the twist was the wraiths couldn't actually fire their gun. They had to just smash into the ghosts, which was much harder but a lot more fun. But how was this possible? Well, the creator found a way to remove the wraith cannon when the driver entered the arena, utilizing shield walls, teleports, and explosives. Something that I'm pretty sure Bungie did not see coming. You'd think that an unintended mechanic like this wouldn't actually be consistent enough to make for a great game mode, but to this day I've never seen a wraith make it to the arena without losing its cannon first. Frankly, the ingenuity displayed in some of Reach's most well-known custom games is pretty incredible. And by giving players the freedom to create, Reach gained an organic community whose passion was reflected in the content the game allowed them to produce. Whether it was custom games or machinima videos, Reach was the perfect canvas. All it had to do was give players the tools, and the players did the rest. And so, in the years after release, the Halo community's creativity was at an all-time high. And for those who didn't necessarily want to put time into creating things, there was an insane amount of user-created content for them to experience. Custom games like Speed Halo, Hot Pursuit, Duck Hunt, Jenga, Crash Up Derby, Splatter Monkey, Fat Kid, Jump Rope, Indiana Jones, Racetracks, the list goes on and on. Reach really was a golden age for creators. Even if the new mechanics added to multiplayer split the fanbase, those same mechanics gave custom game fans more options. And the same goes for anyone making videos or screenshots or anything else. Reach did not confine itself to being the Halo you play for the campaign or the Halo you play for the multiplayer. Over a decade after release, Reach stands head and shoulders above its contemporaries as the game that offered the most complete, content-rich package on day one. When you compare its launch to Halo Infinite, it's just night and day. I don't want to spend too much time criticizing Infinite, because it's not really the point of this video, but in this instance it's worth mentioning again. Infinite lacks a lot of what Reach launched with. That includes co-op campaign, multiplayer staples like Infection, Team Snipers or Doubles, Forge mode, and by extension a healthy custom games community. Not to mention Firefight, Mission Select, a good progression system, commendations. Infinite has quality gameplay, but Reach had quality and quantity, and that is rare now for big multiplayer releases, like really rare. Thankfully though, Reach isn't gone. Reach lives on in the Master Chief Collection. In fact, it's better than ever. New updates have added a custom games browser, allowing players to join other people's custom games with friends, and you can host your own. A bunch of new Forge items, like vehicles from the campaign, have been added. Everything from the forklift to the Seraph, and that makes for even crazier custom games. Every day a solid population of people are playing, and while it can be tough to find an invasion match, which is mainly due to 343 randomly putting it in the ranked playlist for some reason, which I'll never understand, a lot of modes are still going strong. There may come a time when Halo Reach starts to fade away for real, but thanks to another shaky launch by 343, Halo players still haven't really fully committed to the latest iteration in the series. It's true that Infinite's Forge mode has the potential to just absolutely eclipse everything that came before it. Halo 5 added so many new ways to create, it was honestly impressive, but that game's Forge wasn't really as accessible thanks to its difficult controls. Infinite will have to retain that accessibility when Forge eventually comes out, or it might not have the impact on casual players that the mode should. Reach really nailed that part of the game. It was easy to pick up, easy to mess around with, easy to make custom games, but if you had the skill and the creativity, you could do so much more. What Bungie left us with might not have been the most iconic Halo game, or the most innovative, but it was without question my favourite. All of its pieces came together in such a satisfying way, and I haven't even touched on some of them like firefight or customization, or even the art style, which went for a more gritty aesthetic. You know, I could literally talk about how much I love Reach's art style for another half an hour, but I don't really know if anyone wants to hear that, so I'm just going to move on. But Halo has always been known for innovation. Since the first game back in 2001, Halo has pushed boundaries. You know, it was Microsoft's flagship title on the Xbox. If it wasn't such a massive success, the console could have been doomed from the start. But time and time again, Halo forged a unique path. And with Reach, the innovation didn't suddenly stop, but it did feel less like a game that would inspire 100 others, and more like a game that was simply designed to be the best possible send-off for Halo's creators.
It didn't take long for Reach to fall. Our enemy was ruthless, efficient, but they weren't nearly fast enough. For you had already passed the torch, and because of you, we found Halo, unlocked its secrets, shattered our enemy's resolve. Our victory, your victory, was so close. I wish you could have lived to see it. But you belong to Reach. Your body, your armor, all burned and turned to glass. Everything. Except your courage. That you gave to us. And with it, we can rebuild.